In this continuously changing world, it's only sensible that good leadership must include continuous development, and none more so than in remote leadership skills. But, oh, sorry, I have to start again, Wayne.
Do what you got to do, buddy.
Yeah. Zoom interrupted. Here we go. In this continuously changing world, it's only sensible that good leadership must include continuous development, and none more so than in remote leadership skills. But this is a fairly new phenomenon, and in many ways it has its own knowns. So I want you to find out the risks and dangers that you need to be aware about when developing your remote leadership ability. So I booked a return visit, virtually of course, to Las Vegas to chat once again to that tour de force of the Remote Leadership Institute, Wayne Turmel. Great to see you again, Wayne.
Tour de force, my goodness. You're setting the bar awfully high, man.
Yeah. I can't do any more French than that, by the way. Wayne, I guess those casino wheels are spinning again in Las Vegas and gamblers are flocking there to risk all. But it's the risks and dangers of remote leadership that I want to ask you about. What are the key ones that leaders new to remote need to be aware of?
I think there are probably three off the top of my head, Malcolm. The first is you're working literally out of sight and out of mind, which means you're kind of working blind. You don't have the information you need. We all know there's a difference between leadership and management, but you need to manage, and to do that, you need information. You need quality data. And one of the big problems about working remote is you have frequently blind spots. And that comes from a couple of things. One is that we make a lot of bad assumptions. I think a lot of bad managers, if I don't stay on top of them, they won't work, right? So they tend to micromanage and perhaps be a little aggressive or a little overbearing, which creates problems. There are also assumptions about people's capability and how well they're doing, and they're fine, and if they need me, they'll reach out to me, and that can bite you too. So we got to watch out for those assumptions. And then finally, the biggest thing, I think, once you get up and running on a remote team is responding too late, not being proactive. If somebody sends an email and it doesn't sound quite right, you can't let that go. You need to respond, because if you suspect there's something there, and there is, you want to find out before it becomes really apparent to everybody.
Yeah, excellent. So how do you and your colleagues at the Remote Leadership Institute go about making leaders aware of these risks and dangers, and how do you help them mitigate them?
Yeah, you know, it sounds shameless to, you know, plug our book, but in the Long Distance Leader, we actually have a model that says, you know, you need to stop and think about what should you be doing as a leader, and then think about the constraints of being remote. And too often we don't do that. We start with the constraints of being remote. But if you stop and think about what should I be doing in a perfect world, what would I do about this situation? And then you look at the constraints and say, okay, we can't get face to face. How do I mitigate that problem? How do I mitigate the issue of time zones? And that's when you get strategic and tactical in how you use your technology and managing your time and all of those things. So I think that's the big one, is the leadership component is what it's always been, and we're either good at it or we're not. But if we think about what would a good leader do under these circumstances, then thinking about the constraints allows you to make the kind of good choices you need to make to overcome some of those problems. If you default to email, for example, rather than webcam like we're doing now, you're losing out on an incredible richness of the communication. And there's a tendency to default to what's fastest, what's easiest, and frankly, which tools we prefer. I mean, webcam is not my weapon of choice. You know, I know what I'm working with here. But I also know that the benefits of using it far outweigh any discomfort or ego issues I've got.
Excellent. Yeah. And by the way, everybody, the URL is behind me for the website where you can get further details on the book that Wayne and Kevin have written. Excellent. But so being so close to this new discipline of remote leadership, do you think that all the risks and dangers have been identified, or do you think new ones will emerge, perhaps say as a result of leaders not committing to continuous development?
I think as long as there are human beings involved in this equation, there is no way to know everything that could potentially happen. That is just madness. I mean, you've walked this planet at least as long as I have. You know that people are constantly surprising you. I think that if the last 6 months of kind of COVID-induced forced remote work has taught us anything, it's that nobody really knows what to expect, and there's always something that we need to adjust to. And I think that's the point, is the more leaders can work on being flexible, the more they can work on being empathetic to the changes that their team members are going through, I think they're going to be in good shape. If they get rigid, or we decide we now know exactly how this should work, we're going to get fooled.
Yeah, actually, talking about time there, the news out today in the UK is that 49% of leaders think that it will be the summer of 2022 before they even start to glimpse of coming out of these strange times. So it's lots of things can happen that time, isn't it? Now, let's flip it. What are the top benefits of being a skillful remote leader?
Well, the benefits are, I think, the same as being a skillful leader. You know, when you're working remotely, there are kind of three things I think that come to mind. The first is you can work faster and more flexibly. You know, you have people in different time zones, and you don't have to get everybody together and, gee, we'd like to hold a meeting, but Bob is in Denver today. You know, you have the ability to overcome those limitations of time, space, and dimension. So I think that's the first benefit. The second benefit is not to be underestimated, which is people like the flexibility of working from home, and happy, engaged employees, last time I checked, was a really good thing. Now, you need to be careful, because if you are not actively keeping people engaged and building good relationships, they disengage very quickly. But when it's working, they're happier, they're engaged, they have no desire to go anywhere else. And so that's great. That actually then brings us to the third kind of advantage, I think, which is, if we think leadership first and location second, there's no reason we can't function at least as well as we always have. I mean, for many of us, that's kind of a low bar, right? But the big concern about moving to remote was, will we be able to get our work done? Will we be able to service our clients? Will we be able to come together as a team? And I think this kind of forced experiment has actually proven a lot of people wrong. And a lot of those people were senior leaders who resisted letting their people work remotely, or at least more flexibly. And they're now finding out, darned if it doesn't work. Now, it doesn't work without some work. You have to put the effort in. You have to be mindful of what you're doing. But I think the fact that in all of this chaos, many organizations have been able to function, I think says some things about the future.
Yes, I agree. In that same survey I just talked about there, it says that a third of UK office workers are saying today they want to continue working from home. So leaders are watching, and there may be one who wants to say, I think I need to improve my remote leadership capability. How long will it take for them to dramatically improve, and what can be the payoff?
Well, Marcus Aurelius would tell you that we spend our lives becoming what we're going to be. That's a fairly long window for most of us. I think that if we take incremental steps, we can become much better, much faster. The first step, of course, is being mindful of what's going on and what we do. There's some introspection there that needs to happen. Then we kind of go back to what in long distance leader we call rule number 1, which is leadership first, location second. Okay, as a leader, what should I be doing? If you don't know that, right, there's some basic leadership development that needs to occur. If you are mindful and self-aware and you know, okay, as a leader, this is what I need to do, then it becomes a matter of working with the technology, and that can be a fairly quick fix, or as quick as, you know, anything involving human beings can be.
You have a certificate that can be quite a good payoff for people, don't you?
Yeah, what we've done is, in our years of experience in working with this, we've kind of looked at the key factors of being a good remote leader, and some of them are conceptual and contextual. You know, why does this feel so different? What are the high level things that we need to be aware of? And then you can get really granular. How do you coach remote employees? How is that different than the way you've always done in the past? How do you run a good virtual meeting? How do you help your remote workers who are perhaps stuck or struggling with their productivity? So what we've done is we've created the Remote Leadership Certificate Series, which is a series of 6 2-hour classes conducted virtually online that are designed to jumpstart people's awareness and transition to working remotely. If you're a leader who has been doing just fine and now the world has changed under your feet, this is a really good way to clarify what needs to be done and jumpstart your efforts in that area.
Yeah, seems to me that that will be a nice thing to add to your CV as well. So again, go along to the URL and you'll find details. So Wayne, can you finish with 3 short and punchy key benefits that any business thinking of remote leadership improvement needs to remember?
Well, the first thing is, in terms of benefits, you need to be mindful, right? If you're aware of the dynamics of working remotely, you're less likely to land on a landmine. So you need to be aware, and that's a huge benefit. Too many of us spend our time doing and not thinking about what we're doing. I think another benefit of, you know, developing these skills is that this is the wave of the future. This, as you said, I mean, some people are saying 2021. I think they're talking out of their hat. I think they're putting it off a year simply because they have no idea. And if they say a year, people will quit asking them. I just think that's the truth. I don't think we know anything. And the genie is out of the bottle. And so, you know, if the first benefit is the ability to get the job done, the second one is you're building your own credibility, skills, whatever for the next job, right? The last benefit, I think, is just one of being able to sleep at night. If you're aware of what's happening, if you can be mindful about your approach, and, you know, if you've ever seen a dog out on the ice on a pond and their legs are kind of flailing everywhere, that's how a lot of us feel right now. And so the ability to get a grip and breathe is going to allow us to be more successful and mindful about what we do.
Okay. Remote leadership is here now, and it could be working for your business thanks to the Remote Leadership Institute. Wayne, thanks for that brilliant deeper dive into the risks and dangers of remote leadership.
My pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much.
Thank you.